that sharp, pointy rock might find its new home inside of your transfer case or your transmission, maybe your gas tank. You never know.
That's true. And you know what? That might lead you stranded.
That probably will leave you stranded.
Hi, I'm Alan.
And I'm Hisanori.
Welcome to Borderline Explore. Today our topic of discussion is we're trying to give tips to the first-time off-roader. I just started off-roading last year. And what's your experience, Nori?
I have been wheeling for a very long time, probably over 20 years on and off though.
20 years. That's quite a bit. So you took me on a lot of hard trails. And
hard trails? You haven't been on a hard trail yet.
Well, to me it was hard. I was looking at the sky and I started freaking out. And you said, keep going, don't lose momentum on hills. I mean, what advice do you have for hills? Let's start with that.
What advice do I have for hills? That would depend on the hill. What's the terrain like? Are we talking rock? Are we talking sand? What kind of hills are we talking?
The hill that I first saw, I had traction. That's the first thing I knew. I had traction, so it wasn't sandy, it wasn't too moguly, and it wasn't too rocky either. I had traction, and I was just freaked out by the steepness.
For all you local people to Southern California, I think he's talking about 2N17X.
That's
right?
The one. That's the one. I wasn't sure that I can make it up.
Yeah, they're pretty difficult, especially in the vehicle that you were in at the time.
Yeah.
Which was It
was a 2001 Isuzu Trooper. It was a part-time four-wheel drive system where I just had to push a button.
I think the button you were talking about is the center differential lock, right?
It was the button. The button that can take me anywhere. In that Trooper, when I was trying to climb up one of these hills, and it was more challenging, I got stuck.
When we had to pull you out with the power wagon? That one?
Yes. You got to pull me out with the power wagon. Something I should have done was I should have been more familiar with my vehicle. I think that's the first tip that we want to give. Is you really need to familiarize yourself with the vehicle that you're inside.
What are we talking about? We're talking about recovery points, low points.
All of that. So when we went on 2N17X, this was a huge lesson. First of all was the recovery point. I needed to look underneath to see where my recovery points was in case that I got stuck on the trail.
Always a good idea.
And there are times too when it didn't feel so great, but I got like a sudden impact, and that was basically me hitting something on the bottom.
And that something would be...
Who knows?
Well, I guess the lesson there would be definitely beneficial to go underneath your vehicle a little bit before you go off-roading. Take a look at your low points, see what kind of damage is possible, and try to avoid hitting those delicate areas. Kind of like your transmission, your oil pan, your transfer case. Mm-hmm. Those are all kind of delicate areas, and you just don't want to hang that up on a rock somewhere.
Yep. So, lesson learned. So I went to the Navajo, and I'm looking under there and trying to find out what's my lowest point. And it turns out that the lowest point on a lot of solid axle vehicles is the differential. On the front, it's usually closer to the driver, and in the rear, it looks like it's almost dead center. It probably is dead center.
Definitely for live axle vehicles, yeah, the lowest point would definitely be your pumpkin or your differential. That's correct.
So something I thought of was hey, why don't I just get a lift? But that won't help, will it?
Well, a lift by itself won't get rid of your low point, which is your differential. The only way to get a little bit of space underneath the differential is to increase your tire diameter. And unfortunately, by just giving itself a lift won't do it. But having a lift will actually allow the vehicle to be able to run larger tires, which will actually give you the space underneath the differential that you need.
Okay, so in general, it sounds like getting a larger diameter tire is just overall beneficial. Is there anything that's not so great about, upgrading your tires to a larger size?
Well, it depends on how large you go. The larger the tire you go, you're actually changing your final drive ratio, and if your engine or your transmission or your transfer case, even your gears don't have the necessary low range to handle the larger tires, you put a lot of stress on your joints, you put a lot of stress on your gearing, you put a lot of stress on your CV joints. It's just a lot of stress overall. So depending on what you're doing, what kind of off-roading that you want to do, you really need to think about your tire choice.
I mean, our type of off-roading, we kind of go just to get to the destination, to enjoy the outdoors, not so much to conquer every obstacle we meet. In fact, we almost try to avoid some of the obstacles.
Yeah, I think we fall more into if we were Australian, we'd call it touring. And if we're here in the United States for some reason, everything is now overlanding. But smaller tire somewhere, depending on the truck, but still somewhere in the 33 to 35 range would be really, it'd do everything that we need it to do.
Right on. If I had a vehicle and I wanted to make my first mod, I'm going off-road, would that be the tires then?
That depends on what tire you have at the time. And that
Let's
also
say stock tires, like street, highway.
Stock street tires, yeah. Stock street tires just aren't really strong enough to handle going over rocks and such. You might actually get a puncture or damage the sidewall. But I mean, the best thing would be to actually, if you can afford it, to do the lift and your tires at the same time, so that you don't have to rebuy your tires later when you decide you want larger tires because you got your lift.
That's interesting. It also sounds like it's kind of expensive.
This hobby is expensive, just like all hobbies, so it really depends on what you want to do. If you don't want to spend the money on doing the lift first, you can always just, put on a little bit of a larger diameter tire, a stronger tire, and then just go enjoy within the limits of what your vehicle can handle.
Yeah. There's some vehicles that are sold stock, OEM, like Jeeps, 4Runners, that are made to go do these things. But are you saying they come with highway tires?
That would also depend on the truck. So
Okay.
If you get like what I've got, the Jeep Gladiator, it actually comes with an option of going with either all-terrains or mud terrains, which I opted for all-terrains because I just don't do any rock crawling and or heavy mud. I also don't like the noise that it creates when it's on the highway, so it's just good enough for what I need to have it do.
Okay, right on. There's another tip that I think I'd like to share, is that you should really do your research before, know what you're gonna get yourself into before actually hitting that trail, because that might determine what kind of tires you need. Maybe you do need mud terrains, right?
Absolutely, yeah. If mudding is what you like to do, or deep sand, or if you want to try some rock crawling, then obviously having a mud terrain is going to give you more grip than an all-terrain tire will. But everything has its ups and its downs, so yeah, you really need to think about what you want to do. And even in the area, the terrain that's surrounding you, like we're in the high desert, so we're surrounded more by deserts and hard rock. And some of you other folks will be out in the forest somewhere. So different needs, different purposes.
Yeah, for sure. For our needs, right? I think the reason why you chose all-terrains was because we're going to end up doing a lot of highway miles.
That is true.
A lot of highway miles, and we just want to be capable enough to go explore.
Right, nothing extremely, extreme is in our plan of trails to run. So it just needs to be suitable for the 95% of the terrain that we're going to run, and at that point, I'd rather be running on all terrains, even though the Navajo right now is running on MTs.
But I gotta say, the Navajo, when you're on MTs, when you're on mud terrains, some things you just get through, and you totally expect yourself to get stuck, but it pulls through. You just have all the grip in the world. That's what mud terrains give you.
Tires are actually a big part of it, so definitely, yeah. I'm gonna have to agree with you on that.
But-
So it can get farther on mud terrains than obviously on street tires, and probably more than all terrains will.
Something that always comes across whenever we're going out in groups, it's lowering your tire pressure. Now, lowering your tire pressure has its it sounds like most of it is just pros when you're off-roading.
It's pretty key depending on what kind of terrain you're running, and it's also definitely recommended. I'm lazy, I don't do it unless I know that I'm going through some terrain where airing down is going to be beneficial for me, because I don't like to spend the time deflating and inflating my tires. But that puts a lot more strain on the suspension of my truck. So if it gets bad, then yeah, I'm just gonna have to bite the bullet and air down.
Yeah, lowering tire pressure. A lesson that I learned was that it makes a tire footprint longer, not wider, longer, and it starts like shaping over objects that you crawl over. So like something sharp that may have punctured through a fully inflated tire, it might have actually curled around it, and you just wouldn't know, but you'd be safe.
That's pretty correct, yeah. So by lowering the tire pressure, you actually increase your footprint, whether that be lengthwise. It's also a little bit sideways as well, widthwise. So it allows the tire to conform over objects, which allows you to have more grip. But that's a really huge topic in of itself. So
Okay, we can probably go into more depth on that later. I still have a lot to learn about small things like tire pressure and what pressures. Is there a general rule of thumb of how low you should go?
wow, that's really difficult to say. The weight of the vehicle, the
Yeah,
size of the
it sounds
tire,
like
the terrain that you're on.
We can make a whole new video on something like that.
Absolutely.
Actually, you can probably see that coming. It's probably on its way. A disadvantage I can immediately think of is it lowers your vehicle.
Unfortunately, that it will. Yes, it will.
So,
But the benefits to taking the air out of your tires is more important than the little bit of height that you're going to lose.
that's true. That's true. And speaking of like lowering your vehicle, you should have kind of an idea of what angles are that you can handle. There's 3 basic angles that I know of. It's the approach angle, the breakover angle, and the departure angle.
Also, one of those things you want to check on your vehicle before you go out, so that you don't have to sit there and do that on the track that you're on. But yeah, very important to know.
All right, so the approach angle, something that I initially thought was, it's when I'm approaching a hill or something, that when I really need to be careful to see if I can go up or not. But what I realized is that a lot of times I'm actually afraid when I'm going down a hill if I might just straight crash into the ground with my bumper.
The approach angle is not only just for actually approaching either a ledge or a hill, but when you're coming down off of a hill, it's the same concept. Absolutely.
I think I've hit it a couple of times, regrettably. Is there something I could do to improve on that?
Take off your bumper.
Ugh, take off my bumper. Wouldn't that look like real ugly?
It'll work.
It'll work. Or you could straight replace it.
Yeah, you go with an aftermarket bumper. Most aftermarket bumpers are designed to create a better approach angle. And even if that's not good enough, usually it's a steel bumper. So if you can hit a little bit of ground or hit a little bit of rock, it's not going to be too damaging for the vehicle. So very important.
I've looked into bumpers. They're not cheap.
Nothing's cheap.
They're in this industry. I guess nothing's that cheap, right? But what's cool about it is these bumpers I've been looking into. They have recovery points. There's a place for you to, you can add recovery points, and there's a place where you can add a winch if you want.
Yeah.
But
some actually have little cutouts so you can put your high lift jack into it, so you can lift off of it too.
Okay, so more on the angles of the vehicle, right? You have the breakover, which is the middle point. Say you're trying to crest a hill, and the vehicle gets high centered. That would be the breakover angle, right?
That'd be correct, yes.
how do you get around improving that or getting past an obstacle that you just can't break over?
That you can't break over with your vehicle, you probably shouldn't be in there in the first place. And or you can have very, very good, strong plates underneath. And you need to have a buddy and or a winch.
Okay, something to just drag you along.
About the only way. If you gotta do it, you gotta do it.
You gotta do it. Something I was thinking of about breakover angles is, can't you add like rock sliders on the sides and just kind of slide your way through?
Rock sliders will help on the side of the truck, but it won't help for underneath the truck.
You guys should see underneath your truck to see what is protected, what is unprotected, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
We kind of touched upon that earlier, but it just seems so crucial to know that, especially if you're going over obstacles that your breakover angle just can't handle.
That's true, and you might have something really sharp underneath there that you missed.
Ooh.
And if you don't have any skid plates underneath there, that sharp pointy rock might find its new home inside of your transfer case or your transmission, maybe your gas tank. You never know.
That's true, and you know what? That might lead you stranded.
That probably will leave you stranded.
that might leave you stranded. So another tip is bring a friend, and just in general terms of safety, you should probably let people know where you're going for the day.
That'd probably be a good idea. Absolutely. And or have one of those satellite trackers, something like the InReach or a Spot, where in an emergency you can push a button and
GPS.
Yep.
Yeah.
They'll know exactly where you're at. Yeah, absolutely. And or you can.
Oh, what's that? What is this?
Get one of these if you're so inclined.
Now, what is this?
Do all of that and also allow you to talk to people.
This is a satellite phone, and it works like a normal cell phone, right?
For the most part, except for it's not pinging off of cell towers. It's actually using a dedicated satellite for communication. So
this thing is huge,
and it won't work with the antenna down like that.
Pretty cool.
So having some kind of emergency communication would always be a really good idea. Yeah.
Very cool. And what's some other emergency stuff? I see some other stuff up there.
Let's take a look.
This is a ham radio, and you have to get a ham radio license and use ham radio frequencies. But this is what we use off-road.
Doesn't actually necessarily need to be a ham radio, but depending on where you're going, being able to ping off of a repeater will allow you to contact more people in emergencies. So it's also a good idea. But saying that it's a ham radio, hopefully everyone who's out there using ham radios will also be licensed to use it. CBs will also work too.
CBs and
FRS radios.
FRS, walkie-talkies you get at REI or something like that. Yeah, they could work. Yeah,
the bubble pack radios, as they're called. So, but being able to stay in communication with the people that you're riding with, and or if you're solo, hopefully you'll be able to call for help using a ham radio. If something happens, someone will be able to come and help you. Hopefully.
Right on. Or get a sat phone.
Not cheap.
Not cheap to get the sat phone, but you also have to get a subscription to it.
Right.
Like a plan.
But how much is your life worth, really?
How much is your life worth? I'd say it's worth it. So, as a bonus point, we wanted to mention something really important.
What's that?
Well, when nature calls loudly and abruptly. Abruptly and loudly.
That is very true.
So you should always bring a shovel. Don't we have one? It's the kind of stuff that makes you say, oh, you get on your ham radio and you say like, hey everyone, let's stop, let's take a little break.
Right now.
And that's because the last tip is to bring a shovel and to bring some wipes.
Very good tip. Make sure you dig a hole first. Don't just leave it out there and use paper and don't do that. Dig a hole. Then cover it up.
Cover it up. And honestly, if you can, if you have a Ziploc bag, just throw it all in the Ziploc bag and pack it back with you. Not the poop, the paper.
That's actually a good idea too. Absolutely.
Well, is that all that we have for today?
Looks like it. I think we'll have a lot more topics later in the future. And or you can leave comments below and let us know what you want us to talk about.
Also, let us know if you have any additional tips for first timers. I was a first timer not too long ago, so I'll probably learn a lot from you guys too.
It hasn't been my first time in a long time.
Well, thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please hit like, hit subscribe, and I will push out more content like this.
Sounds like a plan.
Alright, thank you. We'll see you in the next one.